welcome back to an obscure tour at the edge of the internet. I am your host, the Nameless Tour Guide, and today we will be discussing the races of Lordran, and we will then be visiting the Undead Church. And so, let's start discussing the races of Lordran. Now, the races of Lordran are a rather fluid thing, much like the classes in Dark Souls are. You can start out as a knight, but you could become a spellcaster if you choose. The races of Dark Souls are equally as fluid. So what I'm going to be doing today will be covering the physical elements of each race, but there will be nuances that will come up later on, and I'll cover that. And right now I just wanted to do a quick introduction of all the different races. This here is the Undead Merchant.
Oh, there you are. Still keeping your marbles all together? Then go ahead, don't be a nitwit. Never hurts to splurge when your days are numbered.
And we will be talking about the Undead Merchant later. Right now, I just need some arrows from him.
Much. Come back soon.
So, the races of Dark Souls. The first race is this race, the race that the chosen undead comes from, and the race that these hollow soldiers are from, which is the human race. The human race in Dark Souls are small bipedal creatures who seem to be defined mostly by the fact that they have humanity innately within them. So I've collected a lot of humanity along the way, and the way that I do that is by killing these hollow soldiers. I am reaping their humanity just as I am reaping their souls. Because they have humanity innately within them. And that's what it means to be human in this world. There is no real origin story for the humans. It could be that they are already in the dark in the Age of Ancients, just waiting for a flame to appear so that they can spring to life, much like the corpses we see lying around now that the flames have faded. Though it could be that the first flame, when it burst into light, created the humans. Because that is what happened with another race in Lordran, which are the demons. Now, in the Second Age of Fire, which we've talked about up to now, is the age where Gwyn has gone and sacrificed himself, and the first flame has come back to life. But eventually, that flame also starts to fade. And after that, the first flame fades for a second time, the Witch of Izalith decides to make her own flame to replace the first flame, to hold back the dark again, but this time with her own flame that she has created. And when she creates this flame, which becomes known as the Flame of Chaos, but was likely not called the Flame of Chaos at the time, there is a byproduct of it called the Bed of Chaos. And that thing, that Bed of Chaos, is where a particular race is created called the Race of Demons, and we've already fought 2 of the demons. We have fought the Asylum Demon and the Taurus Demon, but there are other demons that also emerge from that bed of chaos, and they are the Race of Demons. And so to be a demon is to come from that place called the bed of chaos. Another race that is in Lordran are the giants. And the giants are trees which have come to life, a tree that is being imbued with soul that allows it to move around and act. And they take a humanoid form, but a much larger one to the human race. And their skin is made of a type of wooden stone type hybrid of the trees of Lordran. If you look at the opening cutscene, there are trees, the arch trees that Velka talks of, and those are the types of trees that the giants are made from. And their skin is pale and white. And if we look at the Witch of Izalith in that opening cutscene, you'll see that her skin is very smooth. And that is because she is a giant. She has skin that is made of a stony wood hybrid. Another aspect of being a giant is that you will grow horns like branches from the top of your head. And these horns, which have the appearance of branches, the larger your horns are, the more wise you are considered. And that is the giant race, and at some point the humans and the giants interbreed, and they create a race of half giants as well. And so the next race I would like to discuss is the race of this creature up here that I've just gotten a weapon from, and that is the race of dragons. And to discuss what it means to be a dragon, I would like to start with the discussion of the broadsword. Now, if you look down the left-hand side, you will see a section called Param bonus, and we have the letter C next to strength and dexterity. That C is a magic number that is multiplied by the strength and the endurance, the strength and the dexterity of my character, and is then calculated together to give me a bonus. So that bonus is 21 underneath the physical attack at the top there. So this means that as I reinforce the chosen undead and put more points into strength and dexterity, that bonus will increase. This sword will become more effective as the chosen undead goes on their journey. Now contrast that with the Drake sword. There is no param bonus. It only does physical damage. And that physical damage is 200. And that's all it will ever be. No matter how much I reinforce the chosen undead, it will always be 200. And that's part of what it means to be a dragon. A dragon is what a dragon is, and it isn't anything more. And another aspect of that is reflected in how we improve that weapon. So that dragon sword can be improved at a blacksmith, but I cannot use any of these Titanite shards to do that. And that's because Titanite shards are actually a representation of the physical world of Lordran. And the places that we find these stones represent the physical nature of the thing that is the physical nature of the thing that has these titanite shards. But to improve the dragon sword, we need to find dragon scales, and we get that by defeating other dragons in the world. And that is because the dragons have transcended the physical nature of Lordran, and so their weapons cannot be affected by anything that is part of Lordran. They need to be reinforced with material that has transcended as well from other dragons. And this weapon, when I do improve it, can only be improved to level 5, and it can never be ascended. We can never use special flame to change this weapon, because it has already transcended. It has transcended the flames. It is what it is, and it will never be anything else. The dragon is inertia made carnate. Now, let's have a look at the description of the Drake Sword. This sword, one of the rare dragon weapons, is formed by a drake's tail. Drakes are seen as undeveloped imitators of the dragons, but they are likely their distant kin. The sword is imbued with a mystical power that can be released with both hands. So here we have Velka telling us that the drakes are seen by people as undeveloped imitators of dragons, but are likely their distant kins. So what is being said here is the term dragon is being used to refer to the dragons of legend, the everlasting dragons that we saw in the opening cutscene. The everlasting dragons are the standard by which all other dragons are compared to the point where this drake, who is a dragon, is called a drake instead of a dragon, because this red drake is being compared to the everlasting dragons, and it is being considered different. It is being considered an imitator. And Velka is kind enough to correct that and say they are likely their distant kin, because they are. And the reason that the everlasting dragons are the standard of dragons when they are studied and looked at by the other creatures in Lordran is because the everlasting dragon are the purest form of inertia. The everlasting dragons are what they are, and they will never ever be anything else. This drake is a symbol of inertia, but it is not as purely inert as the everlasting dragons are, which seems like a weird concept, but that's also being shown in the opening cutscene, as we meet another dragon in the opening cutscene called Seath the Scaleless. And Seath the Scaleless is there at the beginning of time in the Age of Ancients. But even though he is a creature of inertia, he is not as inert as the everlasting dragons, and so he helps the humans and the giants defeat the other everlasting dragons. And this is why there is the line in the opening cutscene that Seath betrays his own, because Seath the Scaleless, a creature of inertia, is instrumental in one of the biggest upheavals in Lordran. And that there is the race of dragons. There is another race, which is the race of mushroom people. You may think it's odd, for those who will play the game, may think it's odd that I'm adding the mushroom people into the mix here, as they just seem like wandering monsters, but they are actually quite important to the lore. That can be seen in the fact that the one character that is referred to in all of the Dark Souls games, 1, 2, and 3, is Elizabeth, who is a mushroom person, and they perform a very important role. They are a very important part of the Dark Souls lore. Now, I just want to notice this. Notice the undead that is running up that staircase, and now he's just ducked behind. And they've just lowered the gate on us. That is the first example of a motivation or an intelligence given to these hollow knights or hollow soldiers. These soldiers are not just randomly attacking us. They are actually trying to protect this place, and that soldier running back there and closing the gate on us shows for the first time that these creatures are actually scared of the chosen undead. And that is why this bull is trying to gore us. Oh, not this bull. This bull is trying to gore us. It is because it is trying to protect this place. And so, returning to the discussion on races, I would like to introduce the final race that I'll be talking about today, which is the Construct race. And it's a bit of a grab bag race, and this boar here is a construct. This construct, the other creatures that are constructs are the butterfly that you may have seen in the the episode where we went down to the Darkroot Basin, and we looked at a tower for a short amount of time, and there was a butterfly on the side of that tower. That butterfly is a construct, much like this bull. Another creature from that race that we haven't gotten to yet are the gargoyles. And these specific creatures are linked to Seath the Scaleless. He, or somebody who is associated with him, is creating these constructs. And these constructs are very similar to the other constructs that we find in fantasy lore, but with one important difference is that they are actually living creatures. They have children. They have families. Unlike other fantasy games where the constructs are simply golems who are following instructions, these are living creatures. They are simply artificial. And those are the constructs of Seath the Scaleless, the boar being one of those. The first era of constructs, were created by Menace, the blacksmith deity. And unfortunately for us who are trying to read the lore of Dark Souls, Menace decided to make those constructs in his own image. And so, there are constructs in the world who appear to be exactly like other human creatures. And it's very hard to differentiate between the two. And so I understand that usually when this kind of doppelganger type effect happens, there can be a lot of debate about how can you trust that anybody in the world is or isn't a construct? And honestly, you can't. And so what I'm going to do is assume that everybody is human until I find evidence that they are not human, and then I'm going to present to you that evidence, and you can decide for yourself whether that evidence is convincing or not, because it is a very, very difficult to kind of play that game when there are humans, especially in a game where there's a lot of full plate armor, people in full plate armor wandering around, and they look human, but then they may or may not be. So, but there is a race of creatures that seem to have been created by Menace as a series of constructs. And the way that they differentiate themselves from humans seems to be that they try to distance themselves from the things that are associated with humanity. And that is the gameplay element of humanity that I discussed a few episodes ago. So they see themselves as not desiring things, not wanting things in the physical world, because that's what humans do. And one of the constructs, when we are talking to her, slips up and accidentally covets something that isn't hers, and she immediately realizes her mistake. And so those are the races of Dark Souls. And now we will move on to the Undead Church, and we see now why they dropped the gate on us, because we just went through and butchered a bunch of people who are seeking refuge in the Undead Church at the end of the world. This is exactly that, is a refuge, and this is a place associated with the final elements of the Way of White. These are the Knights of Boldor, these new characters that we're coming across now, and they served the Night King Randall. And as I said a few generations ago, the Night King Randall was ruled the Way of White, and his knights still protect, or attempt to protect, the Undead Church. And in this place, people who are still sentient come in hopes to find salvation. And that is what the creatures below are doing, and the creatures that we find in this church are doing. So now here we are in the Undead Church proper. The Boldor Knights guard the front entrance, the Knights of Night King Randall. And the altar that we see in the distance is protected by a Baronike Knight, and those Baronike Knights serve Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess. Notice the silver of these doors, and notice the statues just beyond this Boldor Knight. Notice here that the flame is held at the top of the staff. Notice that these statues are made of marble, being a white stone. Also notice the grass relief that we saw in the old church in the woods, which links this place to the gods of Enolondo. And that creature trying to attack me from above is a channeler who is a servant of Seif the Scaleless. Now here we have the Baronike Knight, a servant of Priscilla. Notice how their headdress matches the headdresses of the women in the statues. And notice the very nice shield design here. See, this is once again another symbol of transcendency and breaking the cycle. Here we see humanity being lifted up by four wings. And notice that their armor is silver. The other thing to note about this character is this is also a transcendent character. When I kill them, they will no longer respawn, and that is because this particular character has transcended the cycle, just like that Black Knight. And that transcendency is important to what happened in the Undead Church. And here we have the Channeler, who is in the service of Sif the Scaleless. And he is here because this place was also part of Sif's plan. Some of Sif's plans at one point in time, which we will all get to. But right now, I just want to focus on the altar. And this amazing relief that has been so well recreated in this remastered edition. In the Prepare to Die edition, this relief is quite blurry. I went down many different rabbit holes as I misinterpreted what was being represented here, but the fun thing about lore exploration is you never really go down any wrong rabbit holes. You always learn something along the way. And here we have the races of Lordran being represented, well, some of the races being represented. We have, of course, the human here offering up an egg, their humanity, to this goddess. We have the goats at the top here, the top goat representing the giants of the world and their long horns that grow like branches from their heads. And then we see between the man and the giants, the half race of giants there as well. And then coming out from behind the human, we see the lion. And the lion is the mark of that construct race that I talked about. The humanoid construct race that was created by Menace. And they are all coming together to worship this deity, and that is Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess. Now notice all of the silver. Notice the silver of the Berenike Knights. The silver is the colour of Ulasil. Ivory and silver decorated that city, and that is what this altar is part of the storyline of Ulasil. And here is the god who ruled that city, Priscilla, rendered to appear human, so that the humans that came to worship their deity here would see her in a form that they can relate to. Now in this statue we also see a babe in arms, and that child is Velka, and we can tell that that is Velka by the weapon that child holds, which is the rapier. And the chosen weapon of Velka is the rapier, and the chosen weapons of the gods is another way that you can see their influence around the world. And what's important about this statue also is that when we look at Priscilla and Velka, we see a mother and daughter who love each other. We don't see a lot of the emotion between characters in Dark Souls, so we have to take the hints where we can get them. And here we are being shown that Priscilla is definitely in love with her daughter Velka. It is not the offish relationship that we see in Firelink Shrine between the Witch of Izalith and Priscilla, where Priscilla is all wrapped up and the mother holds her at a distance. And that is a quick explanation of elements you can find in the Undead Church. And we'll be talking more about the events that happened around this church later. And the dark that is out the back here is what is happening here now as we play the game, which is people are coming to the Undead Church in an attempt to control their humanity. And that humanity is being extracted from them and discarded out the back as dark. And now, speaking of wonderfully restored textures, which I am so glad they did such a good job of in this edition, because if I showed you the version in the Prepare to Die edition, you would not believe me. And when I first saw this, I thought I was going crazy and I was just seeing a bad moss texture in the original game. But there, on the Undead Church, you can see the face of a bull, of a minotaur type creature. In the Prepare to Die edition, you can just make out the horns and you can just make out the mouth, but it does look like a smudge of moss, like you see elsewhere on the building. And when I first saw it, I thought I was going crazy. But there we have it. You can even see it from below. That is how great this version of the texture is. And there is also, if you look closely, a head above the creature, as though the creature is also forming the body of another being. And that is great because that also helps to explain another part of the story, which also would have been very difficult to explain without that added detail. So that is great that that texture has been restored so well in this remastered version. And was one of the things that when I started playing the remastered version, I was really excited to get to hear as quickly as possible, just to see what they decided to do with that texture, because I still, even after I read all of everything and became very convinced about all of the connections, I still wondered whether I was just seeing moss on that. So here we are, just quickly at the end of the episode here as we wrap up. Here we have Andre of Astora working on a rapier, the weapon that I just told you about that the child is holding in the arms of the statue of Priscilla, the Dark Moon goddess. And this, and the fact that Andre of Astora is working on a rapier, shows he's connected to Velka and that he is in the service of Velka. And that is why he is helping us on our undead journey, because Velka was the one who introduced us to the world. And now she wants to make sure we see as much of that world as possible to enjoy her story. And Andre of Astora is crucial in that because he provides us with the weapons that we need to get through the world. And while we're also here, just quickly note that now we know that, or now that we've discussed the idea of the bull being connected to Manus, we can see that the weapon this creature is wielding now has a set of horns attached to it. So that is everything for this episode. We have discussed the races of Lordran, the humans, the giants, the half-giants, the mushroom people, the constructs, and the dragons that are inertia incarnate. And I hope that the dragon section makes sense, because it's so important to understand that the dragons are inertia to the reading of the rest of Dark Souls. And so, and then we visited the Undead Church. We saw the Undead army, the Hollow army, dropping the gates on us as the Chosen Undead approaches, as they do fear the Chosen Undead. And now we know that all of those soldiers that we met along the way from Friarling Shrine have actually been there trying to protect the Undead Church. And we discussed its connection to the Way of White and how the Knights of Bold are still protected to this day. And we also discussed how it is connected to the story of Ulasil, the city of Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess. So that is everything for today. Our next episode, we will be going down into the Dark Root Garden. We will be defeating the creature at the bottom of this church, and we will also be defeating the Moonlight Butterfly. Hope to see you all then. Bye.